Hello, and welcome to the Literary Apostate segment on the Apostate Coalition channel. My name is Kay, and I will be your host for the segment today. On today's segment, we will be talking about a book that helped me through so much more than I can even begin to explain. When I first read this book, I was fresh out of the organization, roughly about 6 months. I still have my doubts, as most of us do when you're leaving a cult. The what ifs, right? The what if I'm wrong? What if I'm making the wrong decision? What if? And this book put all of those fears to rest for me. So this is a book that I would highly recommend if you are in a position of still having those doubts. If you were ever in a position where you left the organization but didn't do the deconstruction, so you lived in that limbo process, as many of us did, if you are healing, this is a great read, because this isn't necessarily a book about deconstruction as much as it is a book about someone who is healing from their own personal trauma, which just so happens to include the fact that they left a cult. So, without further ado, let me go ahead and introduce the author and the book for today's segment. The book is called Train Gone, and it is written by Rebekah Mallory. And if you see on the cover here, it says it is a book about a CODA XJW memoir. And CODA stands for Child of Deaf Adults, which I learned with this book. So, from the very start, we know that Rebekah was raised in a very unique subculture, being a child of deaf adults and being raised in deaf culture by her parents. Then you add the Jehovah's Witness element to that story, and it becomes a very interesting story, to be honest. The way this book is written is strictly from the point of view of therapy sessions. So it's almost like you're sitting next to Rebekah while she is in therapy, relaying her story to her therapist. And if you have ever been to therapy or have ever seen any kind of TV shows about therapy, therapy is some of the most grueling, emotionally grueling, and vulnerable moments you will ever have in your life, just because that's how it's intended to work. You are supposed to be vulnerable in therapy so that therapy will work as intended. And we get that in this book. We receive Rebekah's vulnerability, her openness, her honesty. It's such a candid read about a human being who is just that, human, and is healing from everything that's ever happened to her up to that point. Now, a lot of the elements in the book are going to be very familiar to us. The fact that we were constantly told, you have to draw closer to God, or demons in the basement if you watch such and such TV show with magic in it. Those elements are still the same. However, you add the element of having parents who you have to interpret for. I related to that a little bit because I grew up with non-English speaking parents. So there was a lot of translation that was done when I was young, and that kind of thing causes some complexes in your mind, right? You feel like, even as a young child, that you have to care for your parents, because if you don't, someone can take advantage of them. And those are the very same feelings that Rebekah describes. So there are some familiar elements if you grew up in perhaps an immigrant household, or another type of subculture that required you to care for your parents in some way. You will relate to those elements as well. Otherwise, they are truly fascinating to peek into. I really enjoyed listening to this story from Rebekah's perspective. She talks about the struggle of watching people live a double life and how she didn't want to do that. She wanted to be authentic to herself. She wanted to be true to herself and the person that she was in her core. And she struggles to find that person. She struggles to get there. But watching the entire process fold out is incredibly honest and just heartwarming, right? It's validating almost for someone like me, perhaps, who has been out of the organization and also struggling to find herself. So this is a highly recommended book if you are in the process of healing. It doesn't matter where you are in that process, just in the process of healing, it'll hook you right from the start. There's other elements in this book, like, for example, leaving without fully deconstructing and the repercussions that can have, especially when it comes to having that constant nagging feeling in the back of your mind that you're making a mistake and you need to come back, and then eventually doing so. And I know that happened to me as a young adult. I felt like essentially I had to get my shit together and come back to God and ask for forgiveness for my sins and do the right thing. It's a very similar experience to what Rebekah experienced. And there are many, many more aspects about growing and relationships and just being human, right? Healing from that cult loop that we get stuck in. So when you leave a cult, you're so used to a certain pattern that, and this isn't just cult. This is when you leave a narcissistic relationship, for example. That's what you're used to, and that's where your comfort is. So you'll continue to seek these patterns out. And this is, talk to any therapist and they'll tell you this. So she describes these loops that she got stuck in and how hard it has been to stick out of this, or get out of this loops, and find herself, find what makes her happy, and find something that works for her specifically. Very, very relatable read. That's, if I have one word for you in regards to this book, it is relatable. I related to almost every sentiment that Rebekah put on the words on the pages, and that it truly felt like someone I could connect with, someone that I had a lot in common with. So highly recommend the book. And actually, I reached out to Rebekah to get her take on what she wanted me to relate to the audience in regards to her book. If she could sum it up in 2 sentences, what would she say? And I actually do have some words from her that she wanted me to relay. So, in Rebekah's own words, this book is about more than religious abuse, more than being raised in a unique subculture. It's a memorable Bildungsroman with a remarkable ability to bring the human condition to life page after page. And I have to say, I fully agree with that. It truly does do exactly that. You feel it in the pages. This person is human. This person is going through things that I relate to as another human being. So if this sounds at all interesting, I will leave the link to Train Gone in the description box below. And she is currently, or I should say, she wrote a sequel to this book that I am currently in the process of reading. If I find it at all relevant to this channel, I will make a follow-up video. If not, follow me on TikTok and I will surely be talking about it there, because so far I'm very hooked, very interested. But read this first because it picks up right where this leaves off. Anyway, thank you so much for tuning in. I hope you enjoyed this review. I hope you check out this book. Absolutely recommend it. Again, for anyone who is in the process of healing. No matter where you are in that process, this is going to be a good book for you. Have a great rest of your evening, and thank you so much for tuning in.